Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're watching us from. My name is Paul Andrews from Top Education. I want to welcome you to today's affiliate webcast of photobiomodulation therapy and DeFlame your brain. Welcome Deb Zala, who is Avant Wellness rep, and she's an amazing person and friend, and she was able to put this together and get our amazing presenter to handle today's webcast. So welcome, Deb.
Thank you, Paul. It is always such a pleasure to work with you and the Top Ed team. On behalf of Avant Wellness Systems and Top Ed, welcome to our monthly webinar series called In Light Of, where each month we present a variety of experts in the laser world to address how photobiomodulation therapy can produce a healthier patient and a healthier practice for you. I'm Deb Zola with our November topic, Laser and DeFlame Your Brain. So here's a short disclaimer relevant to today's topic. Most lasers are cleared for the treatment of pain, and most pain is due to inflammation. So based on this fact, our speaker has developed DeFlame Your Brain treatment protocols and has perfected these with years of experience and success with her clients. This protocol is considered off-label, meaning what the laser has been cleared versus what the laser has been cleared to do. So it's not been submitted to nor cleared by the FDA, and as such, it's not endorsed by the manufacturer, Avant Wellness Systems. But on a side note, off-label use is quite commonplace and is generally safe and effective as long as such off-label use is not contraindicated. And that's why practitioners frequently use the device off-label, and why the FDA and most licensing boards also permit such use. There is nothing unlawful about off-label use as long as it does not conflict with the licensure rules of your state board. Now, I have the tremendous pleasure to introduce our returning laser expert. I know firsthand that her service to the laser world is truly unique. She's a troubleshooter, an educator, a licensed massage therapist extraordinaire, and a friend. We welcome Amy Cutter, who will now enlighten us on how PBM therapy can help to deflame your brain. Amy.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much, Deb and Mark. I really am grateful to be here because of how vitally important this is. When I sat down today, I read a quote that I have hanging in my office space. I used to be the law and legislative chairperson for the American Massage Therapy Association of New York State 1,000 years ago. And we were fighting people, basically we were fighting to get continuing ed credits, which we got, and we were also fighting people who were practicing illegally, among other things. And I hung this up in my room to remind me to stay the course. It reads, and I'm going to quote it, "It does not take a majority to prevail, but an irate, tireless minority, keen on setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men." And that's a Samuel Adams quote. And I realized that it applies today. So there's currently a minority of folks who really get how amazing photobiomodulation can be. And we've really come a long way since I've started utilizing it almost 15 years ago. But we still have a long way to go and a lot of brush fires to start before the majority realizes that we have a safe and effective tool available. I recently saw this statistic. An American soldier died every 36 hours on average in Iraq or Afghanistan. But it might surprise you to know that veterans commit suicide at a rate of 1 every 80 minutes. I'm just going to let you sit with that for a second because that's tremendous to me. And the following are some numbers that I thought were scary that were posted from the Cedron Institute in May of 2020. And that Cedron Institute is a traumatic stress education and advocacy group that provides statistics on PTSD. 70% of all adults in the United States have experienced a traumatic event at least once in their lives. 5% of Americans have PTSD at any one time, which equates to 13 million people. and $23 billion is the amount spent annually for medical, doctor, and hospital visits for anxiety and PTSD alone. So knowing the staggering number of suicides occurring daily and knowing that the spectrum of people afflicted with these often crippling and life-threatening issues is broadening due to today's global pandemic with daily violence on the TV and a climate of fear and isolation upon us all now, we have to talk about how we're treating PTSD today because quite literally lives are at stake. So let's look at what the current treatments look like. Today's most common ways to treat PTSD are talk therapy, medication, and meditation. Talk therapy traditionally occurs over 12 to 16 weeks. This is listed by the Anxiety and Depression Association of America as the best treatment to date for PTSD. 12 to 16 weeks. Medications are sometimes used as an adjunct to talk therapies, and there's two basic types. Benzodiazepines, which are quick-acting medication, but they can be highly addictive, and antidepressants, which are hard to regulate from person to person and can have adverse side effects, which creates a need for more medications to treat the side effects. And you've all seen the commercials, 30 seconds of someone speaking at double speed saying side effects may include diarrhea, vomiting, suicidal thoughts, and on and on and on. And most of the time I'm thinking, and I would just rather deal with the original issue than all that other stuff. I have a friend who was a brigadier general in charge of 20,000 troops during the war. And when she retired, she was on 16 medications. While medications are at least looking at the root of the cause of the issues, the potential side effects are too numerous and vary too widely from person to person. Meditation practices are wonderful, but the hardest to do when a person is anxious. And telling someone to calm down doesn't work. I personally cannot master the art of meditation. I've tried, it's a total fail. My brain kind of laughs at me when I tell it to focus on my breathing and not think of anything else. It just doesn't work for everyone. And while there is a place for everything, there are definitely positives for these treatments. I'm not discounting anything. None of them address the cause of the issue. So what else can we do? In a departure from these traditional therapies, we are going to explore the possibilities of photobiomodulation. And what I'm proposing is that this is more efficient and more essential for a person resolving PTSD. And how can I make such an audacious claim? To understand that, we need to understand how the brain is wired. Remember, PTSD is an electrochemical response designed to keep us safe when danger presents itself. Evolutionarily speaking, when we were hunter-gatherer cavemen and we were walking around, if all of a sudden you felt something, what I now like to refer to as your spidey senses, to let you know that something was not quite right, your body would trigger adrenaline, which increases your heart rate, increases your blood pressure, expands the air to your lungs, enlarges the pupils of your eyes, redistributes blood to the muscles, and alters the body's metabolism. And that would maximize your blood glucose levels, primarily for your brain. And that would allow you to spot the tiger in the bushes ahead. And then your body would release cortisol. Cortisol is nicknamed the go hormone, by the way. And that would get you to run away, right? So you could live and procreate another day. In his book, Blink, Malcolm Gladwell talks about adrenaline rushes that are so extreme that time seems to stand still, right? When those pupils expand, you can hear your heart beating, and it actually seems to slow everything down, right? In the book, people talk about being able to see a bullet discharging from the barrel of a gun. And that's the effect of adrenaline on the body. It heightens all of your senses. So you want to think about like Matrix special effects. We are hardwired to respond in this fashion. The Society for Endocrinology explains that this is a normal response of the body, which is intended to help us respond to a stressful situation. Once the acute stress is over, the symptoms quickly disappear as adrenaline hypersecretion stops, right? But why is this happening? It still doesn't explain what the root cause of all this is. So when the body has either a prolonged or excessive stressful event, the nerve endings go on high alert. When it's so excessive, the correlating nerve endings get stuck so that even when the event is over, the nerve endings stay on high alert. And how does this happen? Well, to understand the true nature behind PTSD, we have to look at the physiology behind what is happening. Remember, when there's a perceived stress, the adrenaline also triggers a cortisol release. This chemical communicates directly with the nerve endings in our brains to activate the body's fight, flight, or freeze response. Nerve endings can get stuck in that fight, flight, or freeze loop as a result of either a prolonged cortisol dump, meaning a high term, long stress or high stress environment for a long time. It's funny, I was considering changing this slide to be a parent with several children trying to have remote schooling as well as hold down a job and try to feed everybody and keep the house clean enough as to not be condemned by the Department of Health. Oh, and try to maintain a relationship with your spouse too. And that scenario doesn't even begin to consider what we are bombarded with in the news daily, right? So prolonged stress levels today are higher than ever. Cortisol can also be released as a result of an excessive cortisol dump. An excessive cortisol dump comes from a traumatic event, such as a car accident or rape. It's a specific experience. The nerve endings, which are programmed to excite and relax, get stuck in excite mode. And even when that perceived stressor is gone, right? So the conclusion may be that cortisol levels remain high in people with PTSD, but in a surprising study, something altogether else proved to be true. Dr. Rachel Yehuda, the director of the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, has been studying the effects of cortisol and surprisingly found that patients with PTSD actually had lower levels of cortisol. She explains it this way, and I'm quoting, "It turns out that one of the things that cortisol does to respond in response to stress is that it helps contain the catecholamine system. It helps bring down the higher levels of adrenaline that are released during fight or flight. Since we all know that adrenaline and norepinephrine are responsible for memory formation and arousal, not having enough cortisol to completely bring down the sympathetic nervous system at the time when it's very important for a person to calm down may partially explain the formation of traumatic memory or generalized triggers." My end quote. Dr. Yehuda is really careful to explain that when we say low cortisol levels, an endocrinologist would cringe because in PTSD, cortisol levels are not lower than normal range, but they are significantly lower on average compared to persons without PTSD. The levels themselves are not abnormal. It looks relatively normal unless you have access to her data, right? Making it that much harder for physicians and clinicians to understand what is happening at a cellular level. In other words, the system is getting short-circuited. So knowing how all of this is happening at a cellular level helps us to address the issue. All cells are programmed to A, fix themselves if they break down, or B, kill themselves off to be replaced by a healthy cell. There is no C, right? That's all they're supposed to do, fix themselves or kill themselves off to be replaced. When a cell is too weak to do either, it remains in a sick, stuck, or broken state. We could compare that to a dead battery on a car. We need a jump start of energy, and then, just like a car, we have the ability to regenerate on our own. When my son entered kindergarten, I was reunited with a woman who I'd gone to high school with. It turned out our kids were in the same class. Her daughter was the cutest little thing, and she had two little redheaded sisters. So we started going to all of the birthday parties and the school events, and it was really great to be able to share this with someone who I had sat next to in homeroom all of my life. Navigating motherhood and a job and school functions was a lot for me. I couldn't imagine what having three little people was like. And then her husband died tragically and left her a widowed single mother of 3 girls under the age of 5. It was just devastating. And I didn't really see her for a while, but after several months, she booked an appointment for a massage. And when I opened the door, she was in a full-blown, hyperventilating, hysterically crying panic attack. Well, I was in the preliminary stages of investigating what eventually became the DeFlame Your Brain protocols, and I wasn't sure that it was going to help, but I knew it wouldn't hurt her. I immediately brought her in, skipped the massage altogether, and applied the DeFlame Your Brain protocols. And when that treatment was over, she said, and I quote, "I haven't felt this good in decades." And that was the moment that convinced me that this was something bigger than myself and that I needed to be sharing it with the world. So who am I? My name is Amy Cutter. As we discussed, I'm a licensed massage therapist who works with photobiomodulation, formerly known as cold laser therapy or low-level laser therapy. And if I was going to get really pedantic about what it is that we do, I would call it frequency-specific photobiomodulation. There's been changes to the terms over the years, but the principles remain the same. I was able to introduce it to my human and animal practices, and because of my backgrounds with music and shiatsu and understanding of homeopathy, it's kind of evolved into this treatment for PTSD, anxiety, and depression that has not only changed the course of my life, but the lives of countless clients that I have had the honor of treating. It has become my passion and my mission to share this modality with as many people as possible, especially those who suffer from or treat PTSD and its symptoms. So what's intriguing about photobiomodulation is the fact that it isn't just for one thing. Because of the way it works, if it has a cell, we can laser it, right? I had to have foot surgery that was likely a result of a sheep shearing incident that I brought on myself. Suffice it to say that flip-flops and sheep shearing are not recommended. However, that's a story that should include a cocktail. Surgery meant not working, and being a self-employed massage therapist, not working meant not paying my bills. The surgeon, who also happens to be a really trusted friend of mine, said that I needed to be off my feet and totally non-weight bearing for 3 weeks. This was non-negotiable, and he totally meant business, informing me that if I didn't, that I was going to risk improper healing and a second corrective surgery if I wasn't compliant. So I reluctantly agreed. I cleared my schedule, and I asked my husband to fill in the blanks where I was sure to fall short on my share of things, both physically and financially. And and honestly, that was the hardest part of all of it. I'm a really proud and probably too independent woman, and having to ask for help or falling short was incredibly humbling and challenging for me. It made me feel inadequate, and both as a partner and a person, and I was terrified. So when I came home from that surgery, I began lasering myself every hour that I was awake. And not only did I not require any pain medication, but I was cleared by X-ray and totally healed in 10 days. I've had almost 25 years of a full-time practice where I've treated everything from broken bones, bursitis, arthritis, kidney stones, to bruises, insomnia, sinus infections, allergies, PTSD. But here's the thing. I'm not a magician. It actually has very little to do with me. It comes down to the fact that the body is designed to fix itself. When we match the frequencies of the cells that we want to speak to, we stimulate the mitochondria of those cells to produce more cellular energy and do what it's programmed to do. We don't add or subtract anything. We just let the body take care of business. And that's where being frequency specific makes all the difference. So let's look at the mitochondria a little closer to get a better idea of what exactly is that's happening. To understand the relevance of the mitochondria with regards to cellular energy, we produce them according to need. And because a marathon runner requires more cellular energy, her body facilitates the need by producing more mitochondria than mine. To coin an old joke, I don't run unless I'm being chased. the mitochondria's performance is ultimately what determines how quickly your body can attain any goal. And to stick with those car analogies, if your body is a car, ATP is the gasoline in the car, right? The mitochondria is the car battery. It's where all of the energy is produced. Remember, if the car battery dies, we can jumpstart it to produce more energy. The energy production in the mitochondria happens in the respiratory chain inside the mitochondria. So let's look at that. Please notice on this slide the electron transport or respiratory chain within that inner membrane of the mitochondria. That's where the overall production of ATP happens in a cell. So it's step 4 in that 5-step process in the respiratory chain is an enzyme called cytochrome C oxidase. It's a photoacceptor, and the reason that we are able to produce vitamin D from sunlight. We are programmed to accept light as a form of healing. So again, when we match the frequency of the cells we want to speak to, we stimulate the respiratory chain and the cells produce more energy, allowing them to course correct and return to optimal functioning. If the frequency doesn't match, it doesn't affect it. It's simply another frequency. It may help a little by reducing local inflammation, but it won't hurt. And it's worthy to note that a laser won't overhelp a cell. You can't make it too good or too efficient. It's a biomodulator. From the Association of Psychological Science on April 16, 2018, called How Mitochondria Keep Our Brains and Minds Moving. You guys can look up the full article if you want, but I just wanted to present a few bullets from it. Mitochondria malfunctioning has been associated with virtually every mental or neurological affliction on Earth. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. Mitochondrial malfunctioning has been associated with virtually every mental or neurological affliction on Earth. That article goes on to say that lowering concentrations of ATP caused by mitochondrial malfunctioning may contribute to the symptoms of depression and anxiety. That same article announced that current depression predicts dementia later on. And I simply don't have time in this presentation to go any further down that rabbit hole. Perhaps in another session, we can focus more on that topic, but suffice it to say, mitochondrial health is pretty important. And listen, it's not voodoo, okay? It's science. When a frequency is weakening or dying, the only way to strengthen it is to match it. If it's too high or too low, it's not going to affect it at all. Every cell has its own frequency. It's the reason that cells know how to function in groups. A bunch of kidney cells will resonate together to form a kidney, the same with skin and heart cells and so on and so on. Every organ group in our bodies is like that. So we need to dig a little deeper to understand what this mitochondrial malfunctioning is all about, what's happening there. And we need to look at something called microglial priming. This is from B2B Health Systems. One of those B's on the B2B is a board certified chiropractic neurologist located in Arizona who helped me to understand glial priming with this analogy. Okay, so just hang in there. Glial cells are supporting cells, outnumbering primary neurons 10 to 1. And although they're often referred to as the janitor cells of the central nervous system, their role goes way beyond just cleaning up the brain. They are the Bruce Banner of the central nervous system. So once glial cells go into that protect Hulk mode, they're primed. And the Hulk protects us, but he can cause collateral damage, right? You don't want him banging around inside your house. He also needs to be able to go back to the Bruce Banner form. And laser can help return glial cells from the Hulk state back into that Bruce Banner state. So remember, cells innately repair themselves. Nature mandates this. The best thing we can do is let the body do its thing, right? We just need to get out of the way. When I was a kid, the belief was that brain cells did not regenerate themselves. This meant that when they told you not to smoke pot because it would kill your brain cells, and once they were dead, they would never replace themselves. They were wrong. Thank goodness. Right? Thank goodness we have scientific evidence that even brain cells can regenerate. It's called neuroplasticity. Not that you should all go out and smoke so much pot that your brain starts to wither, but if you did, it's okay. We can address it. It's also important to note that when glial priming starts, it looks pretty normal to the outside world, right? Just because the Hulk is banging around on the inside doesn't mean that people are having a fit externally. In fact, in some cases, it's just the opposite effect. It can create a dissociative response, right? It's the freeze of the fight, flight, or freeze response. And it's been referred to in the past as that 1,000-yard stare. It's why they call inflammation the secret or the silent killer, right? You don't realize how bad it is until it's dangerous. Listen, if depression, anxiety, and PTSD were easy to diagnose, we wouldn't be here today. It isn't like a broken leg where you go, oh, look, your leg is broken. Let's fix that. It's obviously more complicated than that, but it is easier to treat than we have been previously able. So doing its thing with regards to PTSD means looking at a few different systems. The limbic system is one of them. So let's take a quick look at that now. The limbic system controls emotions and emotional memory, as well as smell and a host of other functions. This is one of the reasons that smells can invoke such a strong memory, either good or bad, right? It's located in the prefrontal cortex and one of those centers that are cues for our fight, flight, or freeze system that we keep referring to. Having a drugless tool that can help calm down that glial priming and return the Incredible Hulk back into the Bruce Banner reduces the inflammation to the prefrontal cortex where that limbic system is located, allowing those cues to be tolerable instead of setting off your central nervous system, or your sympathetic nervous system, I should say. And as an aside, I also recommend utilizing essential oils with my protocols. And it's just to add another layer to the treatment because it's easy and relatively inexpensive. You don't need to have, an investment in rare oils, but the oil should be pleasant to the client. It has to be what they like, not what you like. So I usually offer 3 or 4 different scents before the session starts, and I ask them to choose which one they like. You can diffuse it in the room. You could place a drop on their sternum. You could put it on their pulse points. This doesn't require a special certification, just a nice smell. But because people can have allergies, I always recommend qualifying that first. And I always use pharmaceutical grade oils because they're considered the safest. The next system that we need to look at are your hormones. By lasering the body to balance hormones, we can not only affect cortisol production, but we can biomodulate all of the hormone producing or hormone affected organs to balance itself. It's a biomodulator and will help the body fix imbalances. And while we're at it, we're going to laser the brain to stimulate brainwave function. There are very specific brainwaves that help calm the brain. And if you've ever been to a concert and all the musicians are tuning up and there's this crazy cacophony of sound, that's what brainwaves are like inside your head, right? They're all busy doing their own thing. And then the conductor lifts his baton and suddenly everyone's playing in harmony. Laser is like the conductor. It can organize the brainwaves in a way that can not only help the person feel a deeper sense of calm, it can help with insomnia and a host of other things. And by the way, promoting sleep cannot be overstated. It is when the body makes all of its repairs. And none of this is new information, yet we still have large amounts of folks who simply don't sleep. So that conducting organizes the different instruments in different keys and different rhythms into unity. Another way to think about how photobiomodulation helps the body, we can look at a phenomenon known as entrainment. In the 17th century, Christian Huygens was sitting in a room full of grandfather clocks. He invented them. He deliberately set them to different paces, and he left the room, only to find that upon his return, they had all fallen into sync. So when quantum theorists say that everything in the universe is vibrating, they mean everything, even the clock itself. So there are musical frequencies that science has been utilizing for DNA repair for a really long time, and I also use those. Music has been proven to be a powerful entrainment tool. It's the reason that you can shift the mood of a party with a playlist. And remember, music is also measured in hertz. There's people who can teach entire courses on music entrainment alone. I'm not one of them, but I have heard and I do believe that music has healing potential. We could spend a whole weekend course regarding musical healing potential. It isn't just about a song you like. There really is a lot to it. But the DeFlame Your Brain protocols is a three-pronged approach that helps to reduce inflammation and help the body to reset the nerve endings that are stuck in high alert. So let's just get back to my foot surgery for a second and talk about how I was able to heal so quickly. In the case of my foot surgery, my doctor had given me a nerve block that would wear off in 24 hours. I was encouraged to stay ahead of the pain by taking medication on a schedule, because if you fall behind, then it's hard to get back on top of it. I took one pill and my head was so foggy as a result, I never took another one. But the truth is, I never really had much pain. I kept a log and recorded every time I started the laser protocols. I used protocols for bone, tendon, ligament, scar, wound, inflammation. And when I was done, I recorded the time, and an hour later, I did it all again. Because I was expediting the healing process and reducing the inflammation to the surgical site, I reduced my body's need to signal me that I needed to pay attention to an issue. Pain truly is our friend. It protects us from worsening pain, and of course, we learn from pain, which is another reason that PTSD is so challenging to treat. We are designed to remember the cues that precede trauma. If you have an accident, it might take you a while before you can pass that same spot without recalling what happens. Sights, sounds, smells, they are all triggers for our memories to put us on high alert and get out of Dodge, right? We are fighting our very nature when expecting to not be affected by certain cues, even subtle ones. Inside the Incredible Hulk glial cells are creating collateral damage, but we can't see that. And remember, glial cells outnumber our neurons 10 to 1. The DeFlame Your Brain protocols are done without any talking issues. Like I don't talk about anything. I don't ask anybody to discuss anything with me. I encourage them to simply pay attention to whatever comes up, but to try and observe it as if they're watching a movie on a TV screen. If this is your first exposure to laser, there are some really basic terms that you need to understand. And for those of you already knowledgeable, please consider the next few slides as an opportunity to hear the information in a new way. I always like to hear other practitioners describe it, so that I have several ways to help my clients understand it when I try and explain it to them. This is a very quick overview. We really could teach a class on almost every slide in this presentation. And the attendees come from different backgrounds, and keeping things basic helps to keep everyone on the same page and serves as a review. I was a massage therapy teacher, and no matter how many times I took or taught a class, I always either learned or remembered something. And it's been my experience with Deb that if she doesn't know an answer to a question, she will find someone who does and get back to you. And I've always been so grateful to her for that. And as they mentioned, we will have a Q&A at the end. And if later you have a question, contacting Deborah is your best bet. So if every cell is different and it has its own frequency, and laser only works when it's set to that frequency, then how does one actually practice these protocols. We can begin to understanding that by examining the basic properties of laser or photobiomodulation tools. Wavelength is the distance between two peaks of a wave. It's measured in nanometers or 1/1000th of a meter. And wavelength is expressed in terms of color. Sorry, that's my dog playing with her ball. In the visible spectrum of light, violet is 400. Sorry about that. She wanted me to throw her ball for her. Violet's 400s, green is the 500s, red is the 600s. And infrared light is invisible and extends from that nominal edge of the visible spectrum at 700 nanometers all the way to 1 millimeter. A natural property of an infrared laser is that it's an analgesic. It temporarily interrupts, I'm so sorry. It temporarily interrupts the pain receptor process. Infrared is best utilized to treat acute pain and wound healing, but red and infrared are synergistic. They work really well together because they have different but overlapping properties. The red mode is used for rehabilitative tissue response. The cells in our bodies have been shown to communicate in a red wavelength between 630 and 640 nanometers wavelength, and that's where we find an absorbable dose. And Deborah, way back when, used this example to explain what an absorbable dose meant to me. And she described it as it's the difference between a whole organic food supplement versus a Centrum or a one a day, right? So even though those are all supplements, clearly they are not the same. The same thing applies with wavelengths. They are not all the same. Frequency is the pulsing quality of the laser measured in hertz, right? So it's the number of light pulses per second. Depending on the patient issue, we can change the frequency to match the condition. Frequencies of 30 or less are visible to the naked eye, but over 30, the pulse is too fast and it appears like a continuous thing. Remember, every cell has its own frequency, and by matching the frequency of those cells that we need to communicate with, we stimulate those cells to return to optimal functioning. I keep repeating myself, but it's really, really important. This works with every cell, every time. If it isn't working, we are not dealing with the right issue. And what I mean by that is, if you say you have bursitis and I laser you for bursitis, if in 2 or 3 minutes when that treatment is done, your pain level hasn't significantly changed, you don't have bursitis. And that would prompt me to change tactics or try another frequency. Maybe it's tendonitis or maybe it's arthritis, but it will change right away. A true laser must be monochromatic and coherent. Monochromatic means one color, mono meaning one and chrome meaning color. Coherent means the wavelengths of the laser light are in phase or sync in space and time. You can see the difference on this slide between sunlight, which is not monochromatic or coherent, and LED, which can be monochromatic but is not coherent. And Dr. Richard Amy used an analogy that I loved for that. He said that an LED compared to a laser was like a bicycle to a Lamborghini, right? They're both modes of transportation, but they're clearly not the same. Coherence is what makes a laser like that Lamborghini. Lasers are coherent and monochromatic. So that basically covers the Laser 101 segment, but the biggest takeaway should be this. All lasers work, some differently than others. Lasers are a tool and they should fit your practice. If you need to hang a picture on the wall, you can use a hammer or a screwdriver, right? Depending on the situation, one may work better than the other. Practitioners need to determine which tool works best for them, for their patients. And patients should educate themselves so they don't waste money paying for a treatment that doesn't suit their situation. I want to show you some studies that back up all these claims that I'm making about lasers. So this is a study published in Neurophotonics in July of 2016 titled Review of Transcranial Phonobiomodulation for Major Depressive Disorder, Targeting Brain Metabolism, Inflammation, Oxidative Stress, and Neurogenesis. I'm sorry, I know that's a mouthful, and I am actually trying to add some levity here because a trusted colleague and teacher of mine once said, it's never the study, it's always the execution. And I'm a performer, so while preparing this presentation, I wrote out all of the information in my study and I recorded myself and listened back, and I wanted to cry. Not only because I was bored, but because I was frustrated. This is vital information that has been validated by science, and I feel that it's my responsibility to convey it. So I have cited them. Feel free to look them up if that's your thing. I'm going to summarize them as some of these studies are very long and they can be very dry. The authors, one of which I actually had the pleasure of meeting and interviewing personally before he retired, Dr. Michael Hamblin, say that photobiomodulation is effective to treat depression and its comorbidities, anxiety disorders, suicidal ideation, and traumatic brain injury. It reduces oxidative stress, increases BDNF, which, if you don't know, has been coined Miracle-Gro for the brain. It activates synaptogenesis, which are new connections, and activates neurogenesis, which are new neurons from neural stem cells. It's a big deal, okay? I bring it up because I want to underline that this has been scientifically proven. So on to the next study. Is it time to consider photobiomodulation as a drug equivalent? This is the title of an article written by my own personal idol, Dr. Tina Karu. This woman is a laser rock star, and she's the person who discovered cytochrome C oxidase and all that it does in the mitochondria. She is Einstein smart, and yet people don't know who she is. But here's the thing. This article was taken from Photomedicine Laser Surgery in May of 2013. It's already 7, almost 8 years old. Okay, in this article, she speaks to the scientific breakdown of and why and how laser works treating Parkinson's, vitiligo, the side effects of chemotherapy, major depressive disorders, acute ischemic stroke. She speaks about how it increases cerebral blood flow, regenerates peripheral nerves, and how at infrared wavelengths it has analgesic properties. She says photobiomodulation, earlier terms were low-level laser therapy, 3LT, laser biostimulation, has been used in clinical practice for greater than 40 years now, and its action mechanisms on a cellular and molecular level have been studied for greater than 30 years now. Okay, it's been used in a clinical practice for greater than 40 years, and we still don't use it on a regular basis. Almost 8 years ago, she said, the rather old suggestion that the photoacceptor for photobiomodulation effects is cytochrome C oxidase has been confirmed by now. But here's my favorite part of this article. One has to emphasize that laser therapy shares none of the risks associated with stem cell therapy, requires no anesthesia, and is painless. The gene expressions caused by irradiation are confirmed and have been studied in more detail in recent years. And this was written again in 2013. Now, they haven't stopped researching this stuff. The research is abundant and positive, and I cannot for the life of me understand why it is taking the world so long to catch on. While I was writing just this slide, I got 2 texts from clients that I've seen, not because they needed me, but because they had to share the amazing results that they had as a result of our working together. And that's just today. I get those kind of calls and texts with regularity. I mean, seriously, I get them daily. And that's what compels me to be here with you and devote hours of my life to making this presentation as informative and comprehensive as possible without putting anyone to sleep. Effects of inflammation on social processes and implications for health, dated 2018. So it's funny because the first time I saw this was in AARP magazine. It's from the Annals of New York Academy of Science, and Moeni, I believe that's how you pronounce her name, and Eisenberger state many psychiatric illnesses, including depression, have been associated with alterations in inflammatory processes. It has been proposed that heightened inflammation may play a role in the etiology of depression, at least in a subset of patients with depression. Indeed, pro-inflammatory cytokines are elevated in individuals with depression. That article goes on to say, increased inflammation equals depressed mood in otherwise healthy subjects. We need to understand the links between inflammation and depression. And so this is significant because if I was to give you a laser for dummies sentence, it would be that laser reduces inflammation. So we know that inflammation and depression are linked. And we know that laser reduces inflammation without side effects and almost instantly. So the big question is, why is laser not the first line of defense in every facility and every office that treats PTSD, anxiety, and depression in the world? So to recap, when we break down our lives to the cellular level and understand the processes that make things function or malfunction, we can remedy the issues at that same cellular level by giving the body the ability to do what it's programmed to do, because cells innately repair themselves. The idea of constantly imposing something on the body that is not innate to it, as in imposing chemistry through the world of pharmacology, while that can be beneficial and perhaps even life-saving for some people, it should be a second or third line of defense when considering treatment options. Shouldn't we always utilize the safest and quickest treatments first and then evaluate from there? What would it be worth to your clients to experience immediate and drastic positive change in how they feel in one session? So I call upon you to consider photobiomodulation therapy as the missing ingredient in helping your patients to reduce, if not eliminate, the most debilitating aspects of their post-traumatic stress. I recently heard Brene Brown say that stories are research with a soul. So I would like to end this with my story. And what you may or may not know about me is that my first love is acting, performing, singing. In fact, I went to a theater school on Broadway right after high school. I was in the 5th grade when I got a part in the High School Musical. My sister was a senior, and so was one of her classmates, a guy named Jim Mangold. He was my sister's age, and so he was a senior when I was in the 5th grade. We were all in the Music Man together. Flash forward a few years, and some mutual friends suggested me for a part in one of his college projects, a student film which I believe was called The Barn, but I'm not positive. By the way, Jim went on to direct films called Girl Interrupted, Walk the Line, and Ford versus Ferrari, with a who's who of Hollywood in every one of those films. And, you know, he's gotten all sorts of awards and all sorts of award nominations. But what you may not know is that he directed a film called Copland, and that was actually based on our hometown. But I digress. So here I am getting ready for my first official screen test. I'm very excited. I had on a cute little outfit. I'm curling my hair and about to leave when there's a knock at my door. And I open it, and 3 large girls whom I'd never seen before pushed their way into the door and proceeded to beat the crap out of me. I was mugged in my own apartment. They punched me dozens of times, mostly in the face, and left. And I never saw them again. the police took me to the hospital where I had to call Jim and let him know that I wasn't coming because I'd been hit so hard in the forehead that you could see the outline of her fist and the bruising in my head before I left the hospital. And it drained down into my eyes for 6 weeks. By the time I was healed, the project was over and I never got to do my screen test for him. I was telling that story to a friend of mine and I said, yeah, if I had laser, I would have lasered myself and just rescheduled because bruises heal so fast, like 2-3 days. And then it really struck me that I realized not only would I have been able to physically been okay, but for months after that accident or incident, I should say, I was constantly looking over my shoulder. Every time I saw a big girl at school, especially if she was with 2 other girls, my heart would race and I would immediately think, is that her? Is she going to come after me again? But I couldn't stay in my apartment. I had to move out and find someplace else to live in the middle of the semester. It was horrible. I was really fortunate and I had some really great friends at the time. But I think about how different my life may have been if I had those tools to not only heal the bruises, but heal the constant, overwhelming fear that I had. Now, I'm not saying that I would have gone on to be in Girl Interrupted and eventually marry Brad Pitt, but no, but seriously, the thought of not having to live with that type of anguish for people who are experiencing it is what drives me to share all of this now. So I ask, who do you know that is struggling from the effects of PTSD? Well, thank goodness there are other treatment options available. Doesn't it make sense to utilize the drug-free, fast-acting treatment with no adverse side effects known as photobiomodulation as the first treatment? I am truly grateful for your time and the opportunity to present all of this to you. And with that, I will hand it back to Deb Zala.
Amy, all I can say is, wow. Had you gotten that screen test, you would probably not be sitting here teaching this wonderful concept to all of our listeners and other people who will enjoy the replay. So it's talk about lemonade from lemons. My goodness. Thank you for being so open and honest, and that was just incredible. And by the way, everyone out there, I have personally implemented this protocol with Amy's instruction, and it actually is quite simple. I was a little intimidated because I'm not a practitioner, but I do have friends that would benefit from this. And after Amy taught me, I thought, my goodness, it's simple and it's effective, and it certainly is a wonderful alternative to what's out there.
Well, thank you so much, Amy. That was amazing. Tons of information compacted into a very small amount of time. We do appreciate you taking the time. And Deb, again, thank you for facilitating such an awesome presentation. So thank you so much. If you want more information on top education, visit toolsofpractice.com.